What's the biggest bullet you've ever dodged? Grandma got a flat tire. Pulled over. As she was on the side fixing the tire, her car was hit and totaled. Right from her hands. She was okay. I can just picture an old lady kneeling down holding a wheel brace with a puzzled look on her face. I used to roller skate as a kid outside my house down a hill and never wore any kind of protection. Suddenly one day, before I go out, my older brother tells me I can't leave unless I put on a helmet. Which is weird, since he's never cared before. Anyways, I do it, and that day, for the first time ever, I fell and landed on the back of my head so hard that the helmet cracked. That crack would have probably been my skull had I not wore it. Years ago I was on a first meet for an internet date. We met at a bar and the bartender carded us. Even though we were both older, they were doing stings in the area, so he was carding every single person. Handed mine right over, but my date was an ass about it. The bartender checked mine and handed it back to me. He checked his, and rather than handing it back to him, he placed it on the bar right in front of me. It had the sexual offender stamp on it. The guy picked it up, looked at the bartender, looked at me, and then got up and walked out. I immediately googled him. He was on the registry and had been in prison for rape. Lesson learned. Always Google. The bartender and I are still friends. Sexual offender stamp. What country do you live in? I have never heard of this. There are multiple states in the US that currently have or have had sex 9 offender stamps on the IDs. I was a teen driver not paying attention at an intersection at the crest of a hill with low visibility when the light turned green. The car behind me honked, and just as I was about to go, a truck barreled through the red light on the perpendicular road at decidedly ludicrous speed. If I had been paying attention and gone when the light turned green, I very likely would have been T-boned to death. Close street call I've ever had. I was out at the bar with my friends and feeling tired. When I said I was leaving to turn in early, they all good-naturedly gave me speep. That night they all got 1,500 tickets for pissing in public on their walk home from the bar. Not exactly life-changing, but not a small bullet either. Stopped duck hunting with a guy because he would put his 12-gauge Remington 1100 on his shoulders with no thought to where the barrel was pointing. I'd tell him to point it the other way or I'd stop and move to the other side, but he'd shift it around, and it would end up pointing at my head when we were walking. I told him I wouldn't hunt with him anymore, and he was pissed at me and called me a peeping pussy and that there was no danger because the safety was on. A couple weeks later he told me he had an accidental discharge with the gun on his shoulder. I was on the train in Brooklyn a few years ago. Next to me was this man who had a big ass house tool in his book bag. I think it was a hammer. I'm shoulder to peeping shoulder next to this guy and I knew something was up. He was moving very oddly. It was just the vibe that this man is up to something. I decided that once we got to the next stop, I would get off the train and catch the next train, which I did. 30 minutes later this guy gets off the train at my stop and starts attacking people. He went after cops and was shot to death. If I didn't get off that train and instead got off with him, I might be dead. I was out kayaking on a lake and several bullets whizzed by me. There was a distinct crack bus sound as it went by. I think some people were just out plinking in their backyard, adjacent to the lake, and didn't think a backstop was necessary. This also happened to me a few weeks later, when I was paddling on a small stream. Bullets whizzed by above the bank, just over my head. I don't think anyone knew I was there either time. Regardless, when you go out and shoot stuff, make sure there's a backstop. FFS. Also, I don't know how big the bullets were, so I'm unsure which was the biggest bullet dodged. As a dead guy, I would be so pissed off to learn my life ended because I was floating in a goddamn boat at the wrong second. How did you die? He probably stopped living.